Hi, this is Jason Major from the Biblical Cinematic Universe, and today we're going to be talking about the Gospel of Matthew from the Visual Bible from 1993. This is a book by Bruce Marchiano, who played Jesus, wrote, called In the Footsteps of Jesus, and it details his experience playing Jesus. Maybe I'll review that in a separate video as its own thing, but this gives you a picture of it, and his picture was also used for this book, Jesus Man of Joy. And Jesus Man of Joy is a book about who Jesus is as a man of joy, who loved people, who loved God, and it very much inspired the director and the actor in the making of this film. So the other thing for context to give you is that my Bible movie reviews are meant to be a guide so that you will sort of hear what I say and then decide whether you think the movie might be better than what I review or might not be as interesting to you from my review. Because I'm not one of these movie critics that say, like, I give it a such and such a review and you must agree, and if you don't agree, you're an idiot. No. Enjoy what you want to enjoy. But I am going to give you my review as someone who is a Bible movie fan and a cinema fan. And I'm also coming from a view of trying to understand from the director's point of view what they were trying to convey. Even though I am a Pentecostal Christian, I understand that they might not be my Christian denomination belief, which means my Christian tradition, or they might not even be a believer. They're just trying to make a good movie. So I'm not trying to look at it cynically either. So the other background I want to give you about this movie before we get into like kind of spoilers for a movie based on the Bible is that this movie is by the Visual Bible, so it is a Christian production. Bruce Marchiano and the director were both Christians who really were trying to put their passion into this and really put a lot of prayer and thought into this movie. So that's the first thing, is that this is done through Christian movie company from the early 90s. Back then, in the early 90s, the Christian movie companies were just really in their infancy, if you think. So that's one thing they put in it. The second thing is it is from a low budget, and so they filmed in South Africa. It's a TV budget, basically, what you could call a TV budget, made straight for video. Didn't come out, as far as I know, it didn't come out theatrically. And it's filmed with a lot of unknowns who are extras, who are not necessarily professional actors, so they're just extras in the scene. So all that needs to be taken in context. It'd be like the difference between seeing your Easter play at a nice big church that you go to in wherever you live, or whether it's a small town or city, and you comparing that Easter play, their original Easter play, I mean, to going to see Andrew Lloyd Webber's Jesus Christ Superstar, but on Broadway, or in Toronto or a big city here. Those are two different ones, and you want to judge them differently, right? And you probably would appreciate the one that's made by your friends and family a lot more than even necessarily than a Broadway production sometimes. So all that is deliberately context to say how I view Bible movies. So for this movie, the Gospel of Matthew, what I want to share is, let's share the good. It is a word-for-word adaptation, so that provides some challenges and it's some things that make it very interesting and very cool for some people because it's word-for-word. Bruce Marchiano is the main actor who plays Jesus in this, and he does a lot of his lines. He plays him a man of joy. Back in the early 90s, there weren't a lot of Jesus movies where Jesus was portrayed this way. There were a lot of the older Jesus movies were focused on the divinity of Christ and less focused on the humanity of Christ because they didn't want to offend the church people. This one's very much focused on the humanity of Christ as someone who loves God and loves people. So his performance is really fun and charming. To be honest with you, he reminds me of like the person that you would want to nominate for your next pastor. If you were like your church is looking for a new pastor, you'd be like, I want to nominate this guy. He's funny, but he preaches the word really well. But he's compassionate to people. He's friendly. He's warm. He has a good personality. Yeah, I want to hire that guy. So that's kind of how he comes across to me in a good way. And then it's told this framework in this movie of Matthew being a narrator, the old Matthew, and the old Matthew is kind of the narrator in the movie. Now, the weakness in this movie, I would say, is that framework works in the beginning when you're doing the genealogy and when you're introducing the story and when you're trying to fill in blanks like, and so-and-so went to so-and-so and those kind of scripture verses. But there are times that the director chooses where he interrupts the flow of what Jesus is saying. Probably it was just to make it not just Jesus talking. And he goes back to Matthew, whose only storyline in this movie is him talking to his people who he's scribes, I guess, and having them write down the Gospel of Matthew. There's not much direct tangent. Also, I noticed the use of music. There are times where it's sparse and where that could have been used to make it a scene more dramatically interesting. So even though this is based on the Gospel, there is another movie called The Gospel of John, for example, that's word for word. This movie, I feel that there are times where it lacks feeling like there's a dramatic tension that's built up. So when you get to the crucifixion and the resurrection, those scenes just kind of play out. And when Jesus is arrested, he could have been arrested for a parking ticket if you turned the sound off. We don't know, right? And we don't know why the Pharisees are so mad at him. The disciples as well are kind of interchangeable with each other and also with the multitude, because you don't really get to know who they are outside of maybe Peter and John. Mary Magdalene as well. You'll see in later Jesus movies, Mary Magdalene is inserted a lot into the Jesus movies as the female perspective. And this one, she takes a back seat to only appearing really at the end and in the multitude, but I didn't really recognize her until the end of the movie. So that's the kind of the interesting things that are about this movie, that because it's word for word, you got this challenge of how do you present it dramatically. How do you, for example, even in the end, the resurrection scene, spoiler alert, the resurrection scene, which is in the Bible, of course, but you don't really see the disciples, and you don't get that connection between the disciples. So there's some scenes where Jesus is interacting with the crowds, but because, and I'm going to say my assumption, because they're not professional actors, the extras just are extras who are sitting there, and they don't really connect with Jesus, whereas in some crowd scenes they do, like when he's doing the Sermon on the Mount. All in all, this is a good Jesus movie, especially if you want a word-for-word adaptation. I'm going to give it, let's say, a 6 out of 10, but it has good repeat value because it is word-for-word. And if you want something just to meditate on before bed, I would encourage you that this is a movie that you might be able to say, you know what, I'm tired. I'm too tired to read the Bible, but this is something that you could just play in the background for a little bit until you fall asleep to just sort of get the word in you, right? It is a good movie for that. But as a cinema movie, compared to other cinema Bible movies, it's about average, I would say, because there's not that dramatic tension that some of the other cinema movies would have. Great movie though, still. I would recommend seeing the Gospel of Matthew Visual Bible, which they also have another one, which is the Visual Bible Acts, which follows it up. Until then, we'll talk more about the Biblical Cinematic Universe. Bye.